Hey, hey, hey! It's great to be with you today for another chapter reading or two. I am super excited because the chapter after the next two that I'm going to read likely today, I believe I'm going to get through too. But the one after that is Living in the Moment, which will be likely tomorrow. But living in the moment is what we can only ever do now. So look forward to sharing this with you. This morning we did have the album 22.2 monthly meeting. Next meeting will be February 22nd. And the time is between 12 or 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So those who are involved got an email. And if you're not involved yet, but you want to reach out, the video I posted right before this is the recording of that meeting. There's details in it. And I would love to get you added to the list so that you get the details when they become available. And it's ultimately July is when we're going to launch that project and add it down to album 22. And so this is gonna be pretty major. I'm feeling, and it's all part of reharmonizing or harmonizing humanity with an extra E for the energy that we intentionally direct instead of having it be put on us, because we either create by default or design, and we have to choose. So hopefully we will choose wisely for ourselves and those who love us, because ultimately when we do well, the ones that love us also get a little dose of the vitamins that our enthusiasm and our joy that realign us to the present moment offer. So I wish that for you, and me too. Okay, so, I'm going to put on some lip balm again, because last time, my lips were so dry, and now they're not. So leave a comment when you tune in, please. Let me know what's going on for you, yo. Archetypal Gestalts, Metaphors, and Channeling. I just want to make sure this is recording. We are. All right, we're good. So, a psychological gestalt explains patterns and behaviors about the entirety of any given subject. You could say, from a larger expanse, or from our perspective, physical reality is just a psychological gestalt. It is just one course of experience among a myriad of experiences or psychological gestalts available throughout the universes. A psychological gestalt is a non-physical, universal perspective and understanding of a particular reality, whereas a consciousness gestalt is man-made, collective consciousness defined by a particular set of beliefs. Religions, cultural beliefs, or political ideologies are examples of consciousness gestalts. A consciousness gestalt is a much more limited understanding of a reality than a psychological gestalt. However, these consciousness gestalts can be very powerful and have a life of their own, fueled by the collective beliefs of all those who participate in them. Consciousness gestalts are the formation that eventually will evolve into psychological gestalts, or a more universal understanding. Each of you within physical reality are actually trying to build your personal consciousness into your own psychological gestalt. You are evolving your consciousness into a framework to explain everything you do by a given perspective. These frameworks or understandings are unique to your experience here in physical reality. If you took these same beliefs and ideas and put them into another psychological gestalt other than physical reality, they would mean something totally different, or even perhaps appear absurd. The consciousness gestalts you have created in this reality dictate how you function and what you do in any given situation. Most people on your planet are stuck in consciousness gestalts or in their cultural and religious beliefs and have forgotten to continue to expand their consciousness into an understanding of the whole psychological gestalt of physical reality. The larger consciousness gestalts tell you how to live and die and what to do. They explain physical reality for your consciousness so you have a framework from which to understand it. But if you're evolving your own consciousness into your own psychological gestalt, you will eventually let go of the need for other individuals or gestalts to explain to you how your consciousness should be developing. As you are in the process of developing your consciousness, you go through many experiences. However, Most of you now take those experiences and filter them through the light of the consciousness gestalt that you are currently in to explain what you're doing and why you are doing it. When you originally began to become stuck in your minor consciousness gestalts, you needed ways of getting yourself out of them. You needed ways of seeing physical reality and other realities in a different light. So at that point in time, some of your neighboring realities, which are psychological gestalts in and of themselves, began to filter through to you. A few minor psychological gestalts from this reality. A few minor psychological gestalts from their realities in order to infiltrate them here to allow you to expand into them. A psychological gestalt will have all the behavioral patterns for a given reality, and this can be represented as an archetypal stereotype or referred to as an archetypal gestalt. Your neighboring realities had different forms of gestalts than you do here. Your neighboring realities had different forms of gestalts than you do here. They began to let you borrow some of them so that you could learn from a different perspective. So let's say they have a Christ consciousness, as it were. Your Christ consciousness is different than Christ, the man. They are two different things. Many of these archetypal energies and a lot of what individuals are channeling are the Christ consciousness gestalt, its belief systems and metaphors. They are archetypal energies. That is all they are. This archetypal gestalt, the Christ consciousness gestalt, explains to the individual a whole way of philosophy and a whole way of psychologically viewing reality. The basic metaphor of the Christ consciousness, as it were, is an individual that comes innocent into the world. As they come innocent into the world, they are raised into greatness. As they are raised into greatness, they then try to elevate the consciousness or help the world. From there, they are crucified or killed for their journey and for what they have done. If you look at your lives, this is the actual stereotype almost all of you are living. It is called a savior-martyr syndrome. It is called a savior-martyr syndrome. Maybe you don't compare yourselves to Christ, but you technically come into the world as children innocent. You move from there into understanding, elevating your consciousness, and from there you move into a place of trying to do your best for the world, doing what is right, doing what is proper, and elevating consciousness. From there, you feel that you are just stoned or crucified for what you are doing. These stereotypes or archetypal forms have actually existed in your reality for eons of time. They are not new. In other words, Christ wasn't the first Christ or the first individual to portray the same set of psychological thinking, functioning, and reasoning. The only difference is that the one you call Jesus became noted after death simply because of the mechanics around it. For eons of time upon your plane, there have been many who have birthed into any one of the several of these psychological gestalts or archetypal story or archetypal stereotypes. It is a way of growing and enlightening oneself upon this plane. Prior to coming here, the individual might go through and pick out a psychological stereotype for physical reality, much as you would clothes. What you're experiencing as behavior here and what you experienced as behavior in another reality are going to have two different results in both realities. In physical reality, it would be one reaction. In another reality, another reaction. If you dropped a ball on the planet here, you know what would happen. It would drop in a certain way and at a certain speed. If you dropped it on the moon, it's going to have a different reaction. Your psychological gestalts are the same way. You can take this very same action, put it into two different mediums of psychological functioning, and end up with two totally different realities, and end up with two totally different results. The Christ metaphor existed a very long time before what you term Christ, the man, came into existence. It is a stereotype which is functioning of brain schematics. It is a stereotype which is a functioning of brain schematics, emotional attitudes, and a functioning of a philosophy of life all put together. You take this as a package, much as you would putting on clothes, and put it into a new medium called physical reality and see what happens. A Christ metaphor or Christ archetype is one of these packages that a lot of you on this planet are living right now. It's trying to move you from the state of just being mere man into a state of being God. In the metaphor that most of you are now using, Christ the man became Christ the God, and that is what all of you are trying to do. You are trying to elevate your own consciousness out of just mere man. as the primate animal into a place of man as God. You say, let's say you took the same archetypal energy or stereotype. Let's say you took the same archetypal energy or stereotype and put it into two different cultures on this planet. If you were in the Orient, living through the belief system there, you might term it Buddha. In another culture, it might be Muhammad. In yet another culture, it's going to be Christ. It is the same energy, the same stereotype, but because of the belief systems and attitudes of the people in any given area, it changes and alters to fit their belief system. Christ the man is not what people are accessing or channeling when they are channeling the Christ consciousness or Christ, as it were. Each of you within your beings have a portion of you that is your own Christ consciousness. This is a stereotype out of an archetypal This is a stereotype out of an archetypal psychological gestalt. Let's try that one more time. This is a stereotype out of an archetypal psychological gestalt. A portion of the basic metaphor is to elevate or evolve out of primitive man, out of the innocence of man, into God, or to elevate man to God status. When you worship God, when you worship a Christ, you are worshiping the metaphor. You are actually paying homage to a metaphor that you are trying to become part of rather than actually worshiping Christ the man. The two stories are different. The actual life of Christ the man is different than what your metaphor and belief system is around the life and death of the man. This is also very indicative of how individuals will take anything, and it doesn't matter what it is, and filter it to fit their belief system. Rather than finding out about Christ the man, they will accept what the Gestalt explains Christ the man to be. Therefore, if they are going to channel Christ or Christ consciousness, they will channel it according to the metaphor of the Gestalt and the belief system around it, rather than actually channeling Christ the man. Nobody upon your plane is channeling Christ the man. Christ the man is not accessible upon this plane, but the metaphor and archetypal energies are. Christ the man is going on with his own journey. This doesn't mean that he doesn't love you. It simply means that in his own evolution, Christ the man is now, even in your own terminologies, Christ the God. It means that he is evolving and growing into his own perspective and his own light. Those who channel the Christ consciousness are channeling their own consciousness. The reason is most of you selectively chose what you term the Christ consciousness as a metaphor to psychologically live your life by. Whether you term it Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, or whatever, it is all basically the same type of a stereotype. The role is basically the same. It is an elevation of man to the recognition of God. Most of you, because of this time period upon your planet, chose to be birthed under this understanding to help elevate the consciousness of the primitive man into a consciousness of a God, and to actually elevate the whole consciousness and the physical embodiment to be able to hold a God in it. That is what you came here to do. Most of you that are birthed here in this physical incarnation brought that as your stereotype to evolve into a psychological understanding. Each of you will do it in a different way. In other words, each of you brought your own Christ consciousness. This is a portion of your intent for the life package here. A portion of it was to elevate the consciousness you're evolving in from mere man into an understanding of God-man. That is what Christ is, God-man. So each of you brought this as a stereotype or a condition for this life to be in. Since you brought it, most individuals that are channeling Christ consciousness are channeling their own beauteous consciousness and their way of filtering and seeing that metaphor in life. Since you are individually dealing with the Christ consciousness and filtering this physical reality through you, you will literally view that according to how you see your journey upon life. Since you use the metaphor of a Christ consciousness as a underlying psychological gestalt for your reality here, how you view your life here will tell you how you view Christ. That is why most individuals see more grandness after death than they do in life. It is simply because they do not see life as being much more than a lot of trauma and drama, and they want out of it. Since they are wanting out of it, they will worship the death of the Christ, which means that they are actually worshiping their own death in order to relieve themselves from physical reality and then step into something they consider grander. The worship of the death of Christ is worshiping the death of God-man, which means that you are seeking and looking for the solace and the beauty that comes with death. This is an individual who does not see much beauty in life. but sees beauty in death. Quite truthfully, most of you on the planet fall into this category. Most of you enjoy life somewhat, or on some days, but you would prefer to be out of here. So you would spend your whole entire lifetime actually preparing for death. You don't prepare to spend your lifetime learning how to live and enjoy life. Since that is what you do en masse, then anything that you would see as an archetypal energy or form is going to take on the same coloration. That is what you have done with the Christ consciousness. You have quite literally given it different form than just elevating it to God-man. You've now given it form to be a symbol for you to worship life after death, rather than learning how to live in the current moment. If you don't learn how to live and enjoy life here, you're not going to like it when you leave here either. The Christ consciousness is just a stereotype. There are other forms that each of you take. For example, anybody that comes to a place of being famous by your terminology is an individual who is working through a psychological gestalt that they have borrowed to learn with. In your physical reality here, you deal more with consciousness gestalts than you actually do with psychological ones. Even those of you that are using a psychological gestalt, such as physical reality or a Christ consciousness, filter it through your consciousness gestalts and lose a whole lot of the impact in translation. Other realities use these archetypal forms, and by your terminology, they're simply gestalts of psychological reasoning. An individual can pick up one of these archetypal forms and actually go into it, express through it, and realize all of the different avenues of learning. In other words, each one of these archetypal forms is another reality. Each one of these archetypal forms in another reality is a metaphor for life. The individual goes into them and very quickly learns all of the behavioral patterns, such as, if I act a certain way, this is the reaction. If I psychologically work in this direction, this will be my reaction. And so they will take it, move into it, and live it very rapidly. So in other forms of reality, what you term a Christ consciousness here is like a degree of learning or schooling. Here you have your grade schools, 1 through 12, and then you have graduate courses. In other realities, various psychological gestalts would just be different schooling experiences. Each one is a different stereotype, a different metaphor for reality, in a different psychological gestalt. So what you would do is take psychological gestalt A and live it. Then you would take B, live it, C, live it, until you have gone through the whole schooling. A Christ consciousness is another reality. A Christ consciousness in another reality is just one of these psychological gestalts. It is a schooling. In the reality where it was formed, which is a reality parallel to this one, everyone takes that as a psychological gestalt. It is just a learning experience. They might have multiple Christs all at one time, just as you have a lot of first graders here, a lot of second graders, and a lot of third graders. You don't necessarily say any of them are higher or lower than any others, but they are just where they need to be for the learning experience. These gestalts or archetypal metaphors came from a parallel reality next to yours. That is how they mature and grow and learn. Therefore, everybody that filters through those realities goes through the same metaphors or the same classes. When you started filtering and bringing these metaphors here to live through, you started making hierarchy out of them. In other words, the Christ consciousness in that reality would technically be about a 5th or 6th grade education in that perspective, or the reality it came from. When you put it here, all of a sudden, you made a metaphor for your entire life, and so you start putting a hierarchy on it. The metaphor is one that is elevating man into God-man. The primitive man, which is what you've been on this planet for a long time, it is very beautiful, but it is still seeing yourself as primitive man. You're still seeing yourselves as connected totally to physical reality. You're not allowing yourselves to see other possibilities anywhere else. Because you are so isolated into this reality, believing yourself to be physical and nothing more, you will filter everything through that belief. So therefore, when you bring a metaphor that says, here is a way of elevating you from primitive man into being God-man, you all jumped at it. That is why this metaphor is extremely prevalent upon your planet. A lot of you are dealing with it and working on it, whether you call it a Christ consciousness or not. As I said, each culture will put a different name on it, but it is still what you are endeavoring to do. Since that metaphor has been upon your plane for quite a period of time, you've had different generations and different people working through it. You will see that a lot of the people in your history that you term spiritually famous have all had the same type of a mechanism or stereotype. The role in their life might be different, but you could quite literally put it in the same perspective. Some of them had harsh childhoods or innocent ones. They grew, they put their word out into the world, and then they were crucified, killed, or persecuted for it. You can put most of the grand people on your plane into the same category. You can put your Gandhi in there. You can put your Gandhi in here. You could put many other beautiful people in here. You could put many other beautiful people in there. They have all lived a life, and as they lived this life, they were also killed for it in many ways, in many cases. Sometimes literally, and sometimes not so literally. In other words, sometimes they were just stoned, so to speak, with words and verbiage because of what they were doing and speaking about. You've had eons of time where men upon this plane have been using this stereotype without an understanding. It is just a borrowed psychological format, that is all it is. So they have gone into it, tried to understand it, and explain it in rigid forms. As they did this, they started dissecting it. When they dissected it, they started putting hierarchy in it. In other words, if this is the Christ consciousness and you're going to try to understand the whole thing, you're going to begin to dissect it and cut it up. So you could say how far in it you are advanced and how far you have learned. Upon your plane, what you term your ascended master is simply a terminology and a title that you're using as a hierarchy for individuals who have attained a certain level or degree of God-man. You're stating that ascended masters are individuals who learned how to be Christ, but you don't necessarily term them Christ. You term them now Christ consciousness, and you have all varying degrees. As you put them in different degrees, you actually elevate them in your own metaphors. In other words, there are many grand individuals here that never ascended the plane by taking their bodies with them. They died and did not ascend, yet they are regarded as ascended masters. The true ascended master is the one who literally takes their physical embodiment with them when they leave. There are more of these than most of you know about because they are usually subtle individuals that do it, and most people never know about them when it happens. Now, however, there are individuals you have elevated to sainthood, so it is assumed they must be a master and must have ascended. Therefore, you automatically just lump them in the category of an ascended master so that they can fit your metaphor. Many who have actually ascended you wouldn't even recognize because they don't fit your names here. They don't fit your stories or your histories. There have been large numbers of individuals who have literally ascended the physical embodiment out of the biological man into biological God-man, as it were. Technically, they took that body to that elevation of consciousness and accelerated it with them. Since you don't recognize their names, you don't recognize them as being from this level of experience. You don't recognize them as being from this level of expertise. You have to put them in different categories when they are being channeled. Since you want hierarchy, you start making a lot of brotherhoods. You start making a lot of levels of angels, and you start making a lot of levels of guidance. Realize that these different degrees and levels, they are all still in physical attitude. It is all one physical reality, one physical psychological gestalt, only one gestalt. They are still no further out of physicality than what you are. So what happens is that if you find an individual you like, you elevate them to the level of ascended master. If you don't like them, then they are just a regular individual upon this plane. Most of your ascended masters were the beautiful individuals who, out of the simplicity of life, literally ascended their bodies. However, in your terminology, as I said, many of what you term ascended masters now that are being channeled, you could say in one form, yes, they ascended because they changed their consciousness and are altering it, but they are basically just gestalts now. It is the same thing as Christ the man. He is not being channeled. Christ the man is living his own experience. The same thing largely applies to these ascended masters. Pretty well all of these individuals that are channeled as ascended masters, or that are channeled as being from any of these brotherhoods, are not there. The ones that are elevating and evolving their own consciousnesses are not going to take the time to sit around in your metaphors of reality and play around in it. You would be reading them. Getting them stuck, and they would be in a place that they would be too physically based. What happens is most of those that are truly ascended masters, that are evolving and expanding, have simply left what would appear to be a tape recording message, a hologram. If any of you have ever seen a hologram and how it works, it can be as real as anything you've ever seen, and that is what happens. When individuals are channeling out of the gestalts, it is a hologram, totally full and totally valuable, because it has the whole metaphor for reality from that perspective. It appears as if the individual is actually there during the channeling, but it is almost like a canned message. At that point, the individual that is channeling the gestalt is connected to it because that is one of their metaphors for life. Individuals will channel their metaphor for life. You will not see very many Buddhist people channeling Christ because that is not their metaphor. In this Western culture, you have enough of Buddhism that you have individuals channeling out of the Buddhist consciousness. But from the other perspective, you're not going to find a whole lot of Buddhist individuals channeling Christ. It isn't part of their belief systems, attitudes, or emotional embracement, but they are channeling the exact same energy through their belief system and attitudes, just as you do here. These gestalts are the same thing. They are literally channeled through the person's perspectives of reality. Whatever the person believes of reality, they'll take that gestalt, which is a hologram, and alter it to fit their belief system. Since channelers alter the gestalt to fit their belief systems during the channeling, any entity tied into that gestalt would be altered by the channeler's belief system also. Most ascended masters would not actually come into the body of the channeler and risk being altered by the belief system and biases of the channeler. I know this is your channel and everything. Wow. Captain Rabbit says that he knows this is my channel and everything, but he's more higher dimensional than I am. So he's offering me a chance to ask him a question. At your service, he says. Well, that's interesting. And how did you come to think so highly of yourself would be, I guess, the question that I would ask. I'm going to see what's over on Facebook. Barry, hey, great to see you today. Hope you're doing well too. I'm going to keep on reading the Archetypal Gestalts, Metaphors, and Channeling chapter, which has about 7 more pages. So, the life of Christ the man and your metaphor of the Christ consciousness overlap on a few points, but they are different. If Christ the man were channeled in his own purity, his own state, his own right, he would be very beautiful and very wise. If anybody was to channel Christ the man, he would have to be channeled through their body of knowledge, first their primary one and then their temporary one. This means that the channeler is going to change it according to their belief systems and their attitudes. You could be as loving, as diligent, and as patient as you wanted to, but if everything you said to another individual was altered and changed and totally distorted by them, you're going to waste a whole lot of time hanging around. You would probably say, well, okay, I'll leave a tape recorded message because they are going to distort it anyway. Then you are going to go on with your own experience. An entity that is outside of a physical incarnation that is now focused on evolving would get stuck in that kind of a channeling situation. After a period of time, they would start trying to talk to you according to your language because they know how you are going to distort it. That would actually alter their reality and tie them into where you are. They could be a very evolved master, and if they hung around in that perspective, allowing you to distort them every time you spoke for them or channeled them, they would actually be trapped into your reality and would buy into it just as you have bought into your philosophical beliefs upon this planet. It would be easier for them to leave a pre-recorded message or a book of knowledge, as it were. Then, at your leisure, you could go through it, Pick out what you want, change it, and read it according to your own belief systems. This would leave the entity undistorted. Most entities that are evolving, growing, and expanding do not hang around to be channeled by individuals from physical reality. The connection has too much of a tendency to literally pull them back into physical reality once more. It is not a matter that they don't like physical reality. Many of them are very beautiful and are wanting to help reality evolve. The grandest way they can help this physical reality evolve is by their own evolution. This means that a true master of reality that knows they are a master or a true Christ is going to continue to evolve by knowing that their own evolution is going to do more for this planet than standing around and trying to help by giving a few words of wisdom here and there. Having once been physically oriented, anything they do and evolve in their own consciousness will be filtered back and help with this planet and evolve it as a whole. Their greatest work can be done by their own evolution. They are not going to hang around to be channeled through every individual that wants to channel them. If any of you that are dealing with the Christ stereotype within your own reality have the ability to connect with the Gestalt, which is termed Christ consciousness, but it is your own. You can actually take that very beautiful light and, according to your own belief systems and your own attitudes, interpret it and bring it through. That actually pushes you into your own Christ consciousness, your own understanding of that, and your own evolution. From there, you can evolve it into any direction you wish or so desire. From there, you can evolve it into any direction you wish or so desire. If you understood how simultaneous time works, you would understand what you term the afterlife or non-physical side a whole lot better. Because you become so attached to physical reality when you leave it, you're connected still to it. When you die, as you put it, you technically don't leave physical reality. You carry all of the physical attitudes and just step out of the body. You have a whole world of individuals who have done this. If the individual understood simultaneous time and could release the physical attitude and actually step back into their own light, they would be totally outside of this and nobody would ever be able to channel them. If you were in a place of being able to totally let go of your physical attitude when you died, you would simply step back into the pure light, the 100% wholeness that you were, and would not be in the dead zone or the area surrounding this planet. Individuals buy into the belief and the attitude of physicality so intently that when they step out of the physical embodiment or die, they are still physically oriented. The only thing is that they now don't have a body, but their whole attitude, their whole psychological structure and everything is still the same. So technically, they're still physical. They really haven't changed anything. They've just stepped out of the body. That's all. There's a whole lot of individuals in this portion of reality that, yes, do channel through, but you have other degrees and levels. But you have other degrees or levels, not from a hierarchy principle, but from evolution that are also watching and working with this reality. You have free will. That is a gift that was granted to you, and they will honor it above all else. They will let you have your struggle, your pain, and your gains just to honor your free will, because that is the most precious gift you have ever been given. When some individuals step out of the body through a death process and realize that they are still physically oriented, they then begin to manipulate and try to advance certain portions of physical existence so they can birth back into it, because that would be advantageous to them. That is why many individuals channel this dead zone, which is still physically oriented. That is why it can still be translated into the physical reality and the physical language. Those individuals that were physically oriented left the physical embodiment, and from that point, they still have the physical attitude, and so they are still physical by our terminology. But by their terminology, they are not. They are dead and out of the body. This dead zone or area is where some of your brotherhoods come from. This is where some other entities are channeled from also. They have something at stake if they are in that portion of reality. They are very likely going to be pulled back into this physical reality, and they have advanced their consciousness enough to know how stuck it is. They have a lot to gain by trying to bring through whatever information they can They have a lot to gain by trying to bring through whatever information they can to actually benefit themselves when and if they do come back. It is almost like a gravity type of thing. If you are in this area or this zone, so to speak, outside of a physical embodiment, you're eventually going to be pulled back into a body just by the gravity of physical density. An individual who has truly ascended is totally outside of that, totally. You haven't had very many of those upon this plane ever. The ones that have, you don't even know their names. Most who ascend off this planet just ascend to the outer edge of the same physical zone. They have not truly stepped out of the physical reality, and this is why they can channel through a holographic imprint. You have a lot of entities that just send signals in because they don't want to get trapped and pulled in by the gravity into a physical embodiment. So they will send in whatever information they can and be whatever assistance they can, knowing that it is actually going to help benefit their own lot if they end up getting put back into a physical embodiment by the gravity. The physical density here is of such magnitude that it has the tendency to pull an individual back into it. Once you're out of a physical embodiment, it is much harder for you to evolve out of the physical attitude than it is while you are in body. In a physical embodiment, it is a whole lot easier to accelerate your vibrational pattern to go further out than you can when you are in the body. I got that wrong. In a physical embodiment, it is a whole lot easier to accelerate your vibrational pattern to go further out than you can when you are out of the body. Many individuals know that they are on the edge of physicality and are going to eventually get pulled back in, or if the planet evolves to where they are, then they will become physically manifested on it anyway. So anything that they can put through as information or guidance is going to benefit their lot, and at the same time help elevate the whole consciousness of the planet. So yes, you have a lot of beautiful entities from this edge of physicality, as it were, which are still in this physical zone, who are filtering in what information they can. Understand, though, that whatever they put through still has to be brought through the distortions of the individual it is brought through. Outside this physical zone or this physical psychological gestalt, you do have other support that is also holding you. But as I said, it respects your free will so much that it is just allowing you to be and to evolve. It very rarely will ever step in or infiltrate here. Sometimes it will put through guidance or direction. It could technically be seen as the holographic imprint that holds your whole universe as you know it. It holds your physical reality and substance, or allows it to be or to exist. It just holds it, and it is the underlying blueprint that allows it to start evolving a little bit and growing, but it does not interfere. It just simply sits there and holds. You've talked about these savior, martyr, and psychological constructs, which are the underlying metaphor for this physical existence. Much of the popular channeling that is going on at this time features a very strong figure, similar to a God or Christ figure that elicits some very powerful emotional responses from people. What is happening here, and where will this evolve to? It is tied in quite a bit to what you term your savior complex, but it is also one of your next evolutionary steps. This savior-martyr complex is what developed all of your struggle. Most of you upon this plane feel that in order to be worthy, in order to be grand, in order to obtain your heaven, you must struggle to do it. That is why it is termed a savior-martyr complex. So most of you are wanting to elevate your consciousness into God-man, but you also feel that you have to struggle in order to do it. Well, why do we feel like we need to struggle? How does that really benefit anyone? These are the things we must ask ourselves. Many of these very beautiful entities that are coming through are God-men. Many of these very beautiful entities that are coming through are God-man in their own right. Maybe they are not necessarily more highly evolved than anyone else, but perhaps they had their experience in a time frame which didn't have all the psychological benefits that you do now. Let's say an entity grew up in a period quite a few thousand years ago, totally removed from all your BS, totally removed from all your belief systems and attitudes. The entity that the individual is channeling can still be a portion of the channeler, but the entity is not going to be as inhibited by all of the belief systems and the philosophies that you have around God, Christ, and all of these types of figures. When these individuals can come through, they don't have as much of a resistance to just being themselves and feeling the love. When an individual is channeling, they are in an open state, which means that they are allowing love to come through and they are allowing the life force to come with it. So, what happens is these individuals do come through as gods in many people's eyes. For many, they come through a very beautiful, highly evolved entities. For many, they come through as very beautiful, highly evolved entities. Sometimes you have individuals that do come through, which have a superior attitude, as it were. And since they do, they come across as putting a lot of people down. But for the most part, the individuals that come through are highly enlightened. They are beautiful. They have a grand message, and that message is usually love. Most of you upon this plane don't let yourselves feel that love. So if an entity that is totally unknown to you is willing to love you and loves you totally and unconditionally, it leads to a place where your heart will leap for joy. You crave that form of attention. It puts it in a place of knowing. It puts it in a place of allowing you to elevate yourself into God-man without the struggle. It is a very, very beautiful evolutionary step. Almost all of you believe that you have to have a God figure. Consciousness, as we have explained before, cannot evolve without stepping stones. So therefore, you cannot take an individual who has believed in an external God all of their life and immediately say, there isn't one. You can't do that to them. They will never change their belief. They will never change their attitude or their system. What you do is actually take it and begin to put it into steps and put God back into them. You can't take them when they have worshipped all their life this beautiful external God or this vengeful external God and say, no, there is no God out there, it is inside. They don't know how to make the transition. They can't. A lot of these entities are making the transition for them and helping their consciousness to make the transition. The first step is when the individual will say, okay, maybe God is in here too. But the belief system has been so strong in consciousness that God was exterior, that they are still looking for one out there also. So what happens is these beautiful channeling situations will allow them to find one. But this God figure that they find is beautiful, wise, has grand wisdom, and is also almost an equal. In their mind, they might still hold them a little superior, but it is an entity allowing them to come up and to elevate themselves to that level of consciousness and to elevate themselves into that demeanor. That is why a lot of individuals use channeling, and that is why it has become very popular. Some may criticize that those intrigued by channeling are giving their power away, but what they don't understand is that there has to be stepping stones. A channeler that is in a place of channeling from the highest wisdom and the grandest grace will not take the power away from the individual. They will explain it, they will elaborate upon it, and they will expand it so the individual can find the wisdom within themselves. These are the stepping stones. These beautiful entities that are being channeled are to the audience a friend, these beautiful entities that are channeled. These beautiful entities that are being channeled are to the audience a friend, a companion, and someone that is trying to help them understand and to elevate themselves into that love also. It can also work the other way. Many individuals get into an audience and don't care for the love. They want to stay closed down. And then they will take the entity and the beauty the entity has and try to drag them down to their level. If an individual using a channeling experience does not worry so much about whether the entity is literally who the entity is supposed to be, but feels the love, goes with their own wisdom, their own feeling, and lets their guidance explain what is proper for them and not, and then the individual can allow themselves to be elevated to the same degree of understanding and God-man as what is being channeled. A lot of you have changed philosophies and beliefs, but you haven't totally let go of them. You might have been brought up from one philosophical ideal, and yes, your ideal is changing, but you haven't let go of the other one. It is still there. It still penetrates your whole entire belief system, and you still believe in certain patterns. It is changing, but your consciousness will not let go of the old beliefs. It has to evolve into something new. Using these individuals in a channeling experiences as God figures is just another metaphor. It is a metaphor to allow their consciousness to evolve from one simple man in struggle into God man in elegance and beauty and love. One of the most powerful things that can ever come out of a channeling experience is when the participants can feel themselves loved into a higher level of existence. Wow. Amazing. So that was the chapter. To be honest, I was getting super tired, but sometimes energy vampirism can impact you if you don't have your guards up. And the comment about being at a higher dimension was interesting, because one who would place themselves at a higher level than myself or anyone else who's actually efforting to add value and contribute in this world is a very vampiric kind of dynamic, because by coming on here and then trying to add value to me through the question that I asked them, ultimately then makes it so that they're feeding off of me and all who connect with me. So just be very aware about energy vampirism, because the next chapter is Shyness and Sensitivity, which I don't know if it's going to touch on energy vampirism, but certainly it's a big thing. This is 16 pages too, and I got tired halfway through, and then I kind of had a little second wind. I have missed a few days as to why yesterday I read 4 chapters, which were all short. Now these ones today are longer, so it's an hour and 5 minutes yesterday for 4 chapters, and now it's been 45 minutes for one today. So it's all relative. So I'm going to separate my YouTube and Facebook so I can be both of the comments as we go, and then we can know who and whose we are together. It's so true. I send you love, it is true. I hope that you will be having a great day when you get this message. I'm glad now I can see. Yay, that's exciting. All right, so let's do this. 1, 2, 3 is the page. Shyness and sensitivity. Shyness is the individual's defense mechanism against the world. When an individual is very sensitive and feels very deeply within their being, shyness is a form of protection. So a shy individual is actually trying to protect themselves from their sensitivity. Some of your most sensitive people are also your shyest people, because they can pick up anything they are in proximity to, including a lot of feelings from individuals around them. Since they pick up and feel what others around them are feeling, they become so sensitive within their being that they can't deal with it. Shyness is a form of pulling away from that. It is a form of retreating from other people's feelings and intensities. Shyness can, on one hand, be used as a tool for growth and evolution in the individual, but it can also be used as a retreat away from life and existence. Rather than learning how to master your sensitivity, many of you will choose different methods of dealing with it. Shyness is one. Defensiveness is a form of shyness, and another way of dealing with it. Some will use recreational chemicals, including alcohol, in order to run away from their sensitivities. Others use anger. You are all very sensitive to your own beings when you allow yourself to be so, but as a society and the planet, you are so sensitive that you are all hurting because of it. So you try to heal your own hurt one way or another. You can bandage your sensitivity or hurt by not feeling it, by covering it up, or by disguising it. Shyness, shame, alcoholism, and other addictions are all tools to cover up feelings that the individual is going through. When the individual can go into the depths of their own being, feel what is there, and express it in the external world, they will learn to deal with that portion of themselves that is sensitive. They will also learn how to deal with it in other people, and then they will find a reversal of their shyness. Sensitivity is an openness and an innocence. It comes from being open, feeling, being caring, being aware of, on some level of your being, what other people are feeling and perceiving. When you are in a state of openness and going through this perception, many of you don't know how to deal with your own perceptions, and therefore it is even more difficult to deal with somebody else's perceptions of reality. If the individual is running away from their own levels of openness and their own degrees of being and feeling and sensitivity, they will not want to deal with other people's because it will only amplify their own. You get into a situation or place where you are around other people and they are in states of their own vulnerability. They are in their own states of beauty, openness, awareness. And as you begin to open, you begin to pick that up, perceive it, and feel it as your own. This creates a state within the being that when one cannot deal with their own sensitivity, they cannot deal with another, so they begin to shut it off. Shyness is a form of pushing away from other people's sensitivities so that you don't have to deal with them. It is a form of saying, I am into a place that I don't want to have to deal with these feelings, so I will change my focus. As they begin to change their focus, they begin to shift into a place that is a little bit of what you would term spaced out. You will notice that most of you, when you are shy, feel a little altered with it. The shyness creates a form of altering so you don't have to focus on what is going on and what is being felt in the present moment. You can alter out of it into another area that you are much more comfortable with. As you do this, it puts the whole mechanism of the body, the mind, and the emotional body into a state of non-reaction with whatever it is dealing with in the physical world. This is the major form of shyness that all of you exhibit from time to time. Some other forms of shyness result from the pulling away from other people's egos, including your own. For example, if you are around other individuals and their egos are demanding something from you, you may become too sensitive to want to deal with it. So you will begin to shut off and pull away to be more unapproachable. If you are unapproachable, then people don't want things from you. Shyness is an ultimate form of being unapproachable. Some people feel these people who are unapproachable or shy to be rude, uncaring, or to be what you term aloof. But it is the shyness that is putting them in a place of being non-approachable or keeping people at arm's length. That way, they don't have to deal with what the people are demanding from them. This is a form of shyness that many of you deal with from time to time in your lives. You have individuals who are wanting things from you, and the easiest way to not have to deliver their expectations is to keep them distanced. When sensitivity or shyness moves into a place of covering it up with alcohol or your recreational chemicals, this form of shyness is also when the individual has opened and is trying to deal with other people's sensitivities and their own. They are too much for them to deal with, and many times they will turn to some of these other tools to actually shut off. Due to some of their spiritual genetic structures, once some of you begin to open to a certain point, you cannot close off your sensitivity. You are open to a certain place and degree from there on, and you can never shut back down. Since you cannot shut off and become unaware of what is around you, you are in a constant state of sensitivity. If you are in that place and not knowing how to deal with it, you will create a way to deal with it. A lot of people retreat from this kind of situation, and sometimes that retreat will include going into chemical abuse, as you put it. Shame comes when an individual is feeling and is sensitive and is picking up sensitivity from others and doesn't want to deal with it. They begin to open and be aware and can pick up the pain and hurt from other individuals. They begin to understand what they are going through and they don't want to deal with it. Therefore, that is a reflection within their own being of their inability or their lack of desire to deal with the same issues within themselves. So since there is not a desire to deal with the issues within themselves, they are not going to want to deal with it with anyone else's either. This creates a sense of shame within the individual when they know that it is an issue that should be dealt with or could be dealt with and would create grander openness in one's life. So it is a sense of guilt. It is a sense that I am not caring enough. I am not doing things right. Shame will always come when the individual has gone against their own heart or has gone against their own feelings. When an individual is in their sensitive state, they do not wish to deal with anybody else's issues, let alone their own. So they put it in a place wherein they begin to create denial. I don't feel this way. That I don't feel this way. This is totally not the way I am or what I feel. So, as they begin to deny their own feelings and their own awareness, it creates within their being a duality because they are denying something that they are. Their heart is telling them how they feel, and their heart is opening them up. They are sensitive, they are aware, they are open, and yet on the other side, they are saying, no, I am not. I cannot feel this. I will not feel this. But yet they are feeling it. When they do this, it moves them to a place of creating a polarity within the embodiment and within the being that is a form of guilt. This form of guilt will come out as shame. It will always come out when the individual is putting themselves in a place of going against their heart. So if they are in a place where their heart gives them guidance and they move in a place of denying that guidance or that feeling, they will generate shame, as always. Let's say that you feel you are adequate for a job or adequate for a relationship, but from an external purpose, you say, no, I can't. A lot of you feel that this is a form of humbleness, but this is not a form of humbleness. This is a form of denial, and on the other side of it, it is a shame. It can sometimes result in anger. So sometimes shame and anger go hand in hand because the individual on the other side of it will say, oh, I was adequate, but I was passed over, so there must be something wrong. Since they were in that space, it triggers the denial within the self because that's what was already there. And then that begins to trigger a shame or a lack of worth within the being. Are both of these emotions that you have talked about so far, shyness and shame, a result of a misunderstanding about being responsible for other people's feelings? Yes, because when you are aware and open, you are one feeling, literally. In other words, when you are that fully open and aware, you are of one feeling, which means you feel everything from everyone. So when you are that sensitive, you become one feeling, which means not just your own, but everyone and everything that is around you. They become like your feeling. So it puts it in a place of feeling like, oh, this is mine, so I am responsible for it. And since you are responsible for it, you want them to be happy. And if they are not, then you begin to move into a place of, there's something wrong. I have done it wrong, and I am responsible for this. Does a lot of shyness and shame and unworthiness in people just exist because here are these sensitive people that have been put into an environment of all these comparisons and competitiveness and judgments and everything else? They are put into a society of other sensitive people, but the other sensitive people are using other tools to deal with their sensitivity. Some of them use anger to deal with their sensitivity. So if you have an individual that uses anger to deal with what they are feeling, and you have another individual who doesn't, the second individual is going to appear to be shy because the angry one is coming on strong out of their defenses of their sensitivity. All defensiveness is sensitivity. Anytime any of you go into a defensive state, this includes your sarcasm, your defensive denials, your argumentativeness. All of these are forms of covering up your own sensitivities. They are forms of not wanting to deal with what you are truly feeling. So since you don't want to deal with what you are feeling and the awareness or the openness that you are in at the time, you will use whatever tool you wish to use. A lot of you use anger to deal with it. So you shift your sensitivity to anger, and if the other individuals don't want to use anger, you are putting a lot of sensitive people into a world of anger. That makes them more sensitive because there is so much anger about. So each of you deal with it in your own way. Many of you, as I said, use chemicals to avoid it so you don't have to deal with it. Where does the underlying feeling of unworthiness come in that a lot of us feel? Or is it just a combination of the shame and the shyness? It's a combination. The original feelings of unworthiness all come from your original separation, but that is also why you are so sensitive. You are one being, you are one wholeness, and you are one wholeness that is all separated out so you can each see different parts of it, what you term yourselves. So you have one wholeness, and it feels like one wholeness. In other words, it's like one large nucleus that you all came from, called a source. Whatever portion of that source feels, the whole entirety of it feels also. So the whole of the whole feels everything all the time. There is not one particle of you that will feel something without everybody else feeling it too. As you feel it out, as you feel it, it goes out, and it is just in the mass feeling bank, so to speak, that all the rest of you are also attached to. This is how a lot of your consciousness gestalts work. You are all one feeling. You are one feeling body, and you are individual particles in the one feeling body. Since the whole is feeling all the time, these little particles, in order to deal with their own existence, will shut off the feelings. They will shut off the feeling to be able to handle it. This is why many of you feel that you are feeling something different all the time. Technically, all of you, all of the time, are feeling the exact same thing. You are from one source, and whatever that source feels as a whole, every one of you feel continually. There is no differentiation at all. One of you might feel joy, another might feel that they are depressed, but if you moved down to the root feeling behind it, they are both feeling the same thing because it is a portion of the same source. If every one of you was in an open state, every one of you would feel exactly the same all the time. But it would also put you in a place where you would be clones of each other. The way you change that so that you're not one total feeling body all the time is to create your own distortions within that. So you create forms of denial, you create shifting, you move to the perspective, you move the perspective so that you can focus on it from a different direction. The whole feeling body is feeling one spectrum of energy or one spectrum of light. Each of the particles can choose which degree of that feeling they want it. They want at any point in time. So how can joy that one person is feeling and depression that another person is feeling be the same feeling from one source? It is the same feeling from one source, but it is their direction or focus they take. Depression and joy are not that different. When you go into a grand amount of joy, usually, if you notice, on the other side, you go straight down into the depression. The feeling body of the source, which you are all part of, has a spectrum of feeling that it feels at any point in time. This can be anything from joy to anger or any other feelings, and these run in cycles with the source, just as you go in cycles with what you pick up and perceive. So it is going through its spectrum of feeling, and you are each particles within its spectrum. Every emotion and everything you feel has several degrees in it. You don't just feel depressed. When you are feeling depressed, you feel several other components of depression. When you are joyful, you don't just feel flat joyful. There are components of joyfulness. There are certain things within the joy that make the components of what you label joyful. It is not just one simple emotion. Because of the feeling body, you will go in and pick up out of this spectrum the components of feeling. That is what you will call your mood. Just like when you create a physical body, you go in and pick out what you will have in your DNA structure. You also do this with your feelings all the time. The spectrum of the feeling body of the source that holds you contains every component to create all that is. To create all that it is. So you go through and pick up certain components of feeling, not one feeling, but certain components. Let's say that you take 15 or 20 of these components, put them together in your own synergy, and label it depression. You take 15 or 20 of these components, put them together, and label it joy. This is why every time you feel joy, it is never the same joy. If you really felt what you are feeling when you feel joy, every time you feel joy, it feels different. Every time you feel depression, it feels like it has different components. Every time you feel anger, it has different components of anger. Every one of these feelings have different components every time you feel them. All you are doing is picking up the components out of the feeling body, putting them together, and you are labeling them a generic term. The generic term is joy, happiness, love, whatever you want to label it, but each of them have minor components within them. So you are all one feeling body all the time. The more open and aware you are, the more of these components you are going to pick up at any one time. So let's say that you're into an isolated focus within the feeling body of your source. In that focus, you might pick up 15 or 20 of these labels. In that focus, you might pick up 15 or 20 of these and label them joy. You might pick up 15 or 20 components and label them depression. But as you become more and more open, you become the feeling body of your source, and it is multidimensional and has a lot of components. So now, instead of picking up 15 or 20 components out of feeling, you're picking up 100 or 200 components of feeling at one time. This means that you're feeling joy, depression, anger, a little out of all of these things all at the same moment, and you don't know how to deal with it. Your psyche can't digest it. I thought somebody came in. How can you function in a day-to-day world if you're dealing with this number of components? That is what you are all trying to do and deal with. It's called sensitivity. So you're dealing with all these components and your psyche doesn't know what to do with them. It doesn't know whether you're supposed to laugh or cry. It doesn't know how to trigger your emotional body. It has all of these feeling components and it doesn't know how to express them. Since it doesn't know how to express them, it says, let's just stuff it. I don't know what to do. I have 100, 200 components of feeling, and I don't know whether to laugh, cry, scream, dance. I don't know what to do with the emotional body to make the physical reaction. I don't know what to do with it. So let's just shove it back here and ignore it. When it shoves it back and ignores it, you move into a repression of your expression, which is what we have said leads to depression. A repression of your expression leads to depression. Whoa, that's significant. I like it. But it also creates a form of shyness. It is the psyche's way of saying, I'm feeling too many things at one time. I can't deal with it. And the psyche will literally push them away or take the individual out of them so you don't necessarily leave the feeling. A shy person feels as much, if not more, than somebody who is very outward. The psyche says, I cannot deal with this. I will take my individual and move them outside of it all. The feeling is there, and the psyche can't get rid of the feeling, but it doesn't know how to digest it or decipher it or what to do with it. So it will take the consciousness of the individual, it will alter it or allow it to alter into another space where the feeling doesn't have to be dealt with at that moment. That is why a lot of times when a person is shy, if you notice, they also alter. When I'm feeling restrained or shy, like in a big group or something, it's not a comfortable feeling. I wonder what I could do to feel more comfortable and be more free. Begin to understand the components of your feeling and let yourself feel. It gets you accustomed to it and then move into expression of that. When you are in a large group, you have to stay focused, and that is the problem. When it is just you can just alter out of the feelings, not have to feel them, and nobody is around to tell you you are shy. When you are around a large group of people, you must stay focused to function with those people. So as you stay focused to function with those people who you are also into an open state. You are also into an open state where you are going, I'm just going to start over. So as you stay focused to function with these, so as you stay focused to function with those people, you are also into an open state where you are having to deal with your own feelings, which you have been running away from for a very long period of time. The easiest way to do it is to get into a space of feeling your feelings and not judging them, any of them. Go into them, and if you feel a burst of anger, express it, let it go. If you feel a burst of joy, feel it, let it go. Whatever you feel in your components, let them be felt, and then the psyche knows what to do with them. As it begins to pull more and more of them in, it will know where to put them, what to do with them, and you will become much more at ease with where you are and when you are with people. So a person who has learned to do this, what would their life be like? I mean, would they be laughing one minute, crying the next, shouting the next? I would say the multidimensional beings know how to do all of them at once. They can laugh and cry in the same moment. They can scream and shout at the same moment. They can do everything at once. They can feel joy and sorrow in the same moment because they feel all things. They become all that is. All that is implies every feeling. Every one of you in your evolutionary path is going to become all that is. It is going to be the joy and the sadness. It is going to be both sides of the coin. All that is doesn't imply just one side of the coin. It is the full spectrum. So that is what most of you are trying to learn how to do. An individual that has learned to deal with their own feelings and every aspect of their own feelings becomes very objective. Then they can be around a crowd of people and objectively watch them. Shyness is the individual's own reaction. Shyness and quietness are two different things. Shyness is the person's individual reaction and running away from sensitivity. There is no difference. There are times when you are quiet and contemplative, and that is not shy. There are other times when it is shyness. Shyness is when the individual is trying to escape the sensitivity or move away from it. Quietness is when the individual has learned to deal with his or her own feelings, when they have learned to master them, when they can objectively witness, when they can objectively watch them in other people, because they have become so sensitive to the feeling body of the source, they know what everybody else is doing. They know because they have been through it. That is how we function, and that is why many times we know what you're feeling when you don't, or when you don't know what to call it. We too have been part of the feeling body of the source. By going through it and learning through our own feelings and dealing with the feelings and the components of them, we know when you are dealing with something and when you are struggling with something. We know what you are playing with at the time and how you are trying to put the components together and what you are trying to make of it. When individuals can deal with their components of feeling and that feeling body, they move into an objective space where they've been there. They move into an objective space because they've been there. When you're not objective, it is because you still have something at stake with that feeling. You have not come to terms with the feeling and you will not be objective with it. When you have come to terms with the feeling, you have lived it. When you come to terms with the feeling, you have lived it, you have felt it, you have expressed it, and you have gone through it. You will move into a place of being objective. So if somebody is going through feelings and they irritate you and you cannot deal with or handle those feelings, that tells you that you haven't dealt with them or lived with them yourself. When you have felt them in yourself, have understood them, and have expressed them, then you move into an objective state. Feelings have to be expressed. Feelings have to be expressed. They have to be expressed in order to be emotionally embraced. You have come here to emotionally embrace feeling. That is the bottom line, because those feelings are your abstract lessons. So when you have expressed your feelings and embraced them, you're objective. What other people are going through, you see as their lessons. You also see what they are learning, and you don't become judgmental about it. How do you express your feelings? What if I'm really angry at somebody and I just want to take their head off? Understand that most of you have a different idea of what expression truly is. Expression means movement. Expression means taking something and moving it. It is taking a feeling and moving the feeling all the way back. Every feeling that you feel, every single component of feeling that you ever feel goes back to one root feeling every time, because you are all in one universe learning one lesson. That lesson is an abstract lesson that is coming through feeling. Every time you can take a feeling and feel it all the way back to its nucleus and release it, you have expressed it and emotionally embraced it. This is how you emotionally embrace and express feeling. Most of you feel something and say, oh, well, this is because I'm mad or at so-and-so. Most of you feel something and you say, oh, well, this is because I'm mad at so-and-so, or I'm feeling happy, sad, depressed, or mad because of one thing or another. That is not feeling. That has nothing to do with feeling. It is transference and avoidance of feeling. When you have moved into a place of putting it to an external world and saying, I'm feeling this way because of this, that is avoidance of feeling. That is not feeling. What are they avoiding? Feeling. They are avoiding taking that feeling and going back with it to what it is trying to teach. Every feeling will end up in the same place when it is carried back to its original source. Every feeling will end up in the same place when it is carried back to its origins and roots, and it will go back to the base feeling. Your source in this feeling body is one spectrum of feeling which has nothing but joy. Well, hello, my little man. I heard you over there. Sorry. I could hear him moving around. Shocking. There was an electrical charge. Okay. Every feeling will end up in the same place when it is carried back to its origins and roots, and it will go back to the base feeling. Your source in this feeling body is one spectrum of feeling, which is nothing but joy. If you were to go back into the source and into its feeling, you would find nothing but joy. So the base feeling is joy. Every feeling you experience is joy. So how do you get anger out of that? You get anger out of the distortion of what you are feeling. Joy is not simply one component. Joy is comprised of many components. So you go through and pick up certain components out of the spectrum of feeling, put them together, and you have anger. You go in there and pick up certain components or vibrations, put them together, and you label it depression, fear, joy, whatever it is. But it is because you have selectively chosen certain components instead of the whole thing. So rather than blaming people or situations for your feelings, take the time to go into the feeling. Take it back to its root. Each time you do that, there will be a release within, and you will have learned an abstract lesson, and the struggle ends. Joy? Is that the lesson? Joy is the feeling. The lesson is beyond that, and that is for you to find out, each of you, individually. You talked about how we're holding more components of this base feeling, but our psyches can't deal with it. And that is because you bring them in, but you don't deal with them. If you dealt with them, your psyche would know how. But you bring in these feelings and these base components, and you tell your psyche that you don't want to deal with them. And then it has to find something to do with it. Is there a limit to how many of these components we can feel? Is there a limit to how many of these components we can feel? No. The feeling body of the source that holds you extends from joy onward. Joy is the base or bottom of its spectrum. Most of you are playing only with the joy spectrum, not beyond. The joy spectrum of your source is comprised of over 1 million components. That means you're sitting around taking these different components, feeling them, to understand them, to embrace them, to label them what you will label them. To label them what you will label them. Most of you, at any one point in time, will only hold 15 or 20 of that million and label it with a generic term. I guess I still don't understand why a component of anger would be any part of joy. When you are angry, what are you angry about? Well, anger is a way of dealing with hurt. And what have you been hurt by? Usually someone else, in my perception. And how did they hurt you? They didn't want to do what I wanted. And what did you want them to do? I wanted them to do something that would make things easier for me, bring me joy. Somehow I was let down by them. So you are mad because you didn't get joy out of it, right? So that is one way anger is a component of joy. It is the lack of it, but anger is coming because you are wanting somebody to love you, right? So right there, you've boiled it down to love. And what are the components of love? Well, love is joy. The only way that you can ever be hurt is when someone doesn't love you according to your image. That is the only way you can be hurt. So if they are not loving you the way that you have imagined and want them to love you, you are creating a distortion of love and joy. You are creating that distortion through your images of love. Most of your anger comes at being separated from the love or from the joy. You personify that somebody else separated you from it. If they had acted a certain way, you would be having joy and love right now, but they didn't, so they separated you from it. From your perspective, it is their fault that you are experiencing the feeling of separation. So your objective is to learn to feel all of the components of this base feeling, which you've called joy? Yes. Then where will we be? Then where will we be? You'll be very joyful, and you would be whole. Why don't we accept joy? Why do we choose the anger or the frustration or the stress or lack in our lives? Because you are working off a limited perspective. If the feeling body of your source has 1 million components of joy and you are only feeling 15 to 20 components at any one moment, you tell me how much joy. You tell me how much like joy that is going to feel. Very watered down. Now, there are some of you on your earth plane that are beginning to hold 100 or 200 components of joy at a time. Well, what is that going to be out of a million? What is that going to be out of a million? Well, that's going to be very watered down, but an improvement by 15 or 20 fold. Right. But it is still not going to feel like the real thing yet. No. So, what's out there for us? A lot of joy. But when you can only feel that percentage of the joy, it doesn't feel like the real thing. And it creates a place where you feel separated from it because you are only perceiving a certain percentage of it. If you don't have the whole thing, you'll think you must be separated from it. If you are separated from the joy, it is going to feel that way. All of you complain that you don't have joy, but you do. It is the spark in you. Joy is the frequency that created the spark that resides in each of you. It was created out of the frequency of joy. Within your being, that little light particum that is you is joy, and it is already contained inside of you. You already have it. But we choose not to perceive it? Correct. Because it feels so watered down from the amount that you are allowing yourself to feel. It doesn't feel like you have any, or you have it for only a few short periods of time here and there. Are we afraid of our feelings? Shyness is your fear. Shyness is a fear of feelings, and fear is one of the components of the whole spectrum. When an individual picks up new components that they are not quite sure about and don't want to have to deal with, that creates a fear. But what fear is truly coming from? But that fear is truly coming from not working on understanding the feelings. If the individual is not dealing with the feelings, they will coagulate and create more of a fear complex. To create more of a fear complex. But there is another reason for their fear. They are afraid of feeling and understanding the feelings because they know what is at the other end of it. This is one of the cosmic jokes. You all know what the root feeling is and where it's going to lead you back, because that is what you were created from. Your shyness is a fear that if you go into that feeling and carry it clear back to its origins and feel what it is, you won't have any excuses anymore. The ultimate feeling you are going to find there is the one of grandness and of the beauty of you. It is the love that all of you want to deny. So, shyness is an ultimate denial of self. It is a denial of the beauty of the feeling you would find if you connected with yourselves. What you would find through those feelings on the other side of them is going to be the most beautiful love and joy you have ever found, and that is you. Most of you are still in a degree of unworthiness and undeserving. And if you were to move back into feeling just how much you were loved, you would no longer be able to hold on to any of your excuses. A lot of you in your beings felt that when you were loved into existence by your source, it did you wrong. It loved you into existence, but you felt like you were rejected and kicked out. So you are reacting like a child throwing a temper tantrum. You're not going to do what is wanted of you, which is just seeing the beauty within you. The way out of your anger, the way out of your shyness, is to move back through the anger at having been created and you'd be home. Take your fear and anger and follow it back to the feeling and know that you are all right. When you do, there is no need to feel shy. Being shy implies that you are going to do something wrong, that you might not behave quite properly. But when you are okay within your being, there is nothing you can do wrong. Shyness is a picture or an image for the external. 1 second. Sorry. Are you okay? Well, I apologize for that. My grandpa fell. So I need to very quickly get this off. And if you want to send him some love, I'd appreciate it. And yeah, wow. Archetype. Okay, that's right. I don't even remember where I was in this moment. Obviously, he is more important. And I'm just gonna I literally have like 3 passages left. Okay, I'm just gonna like plow through these real quick, and then I'm gonna get over back to him. And if you want to keep sending him a pop of love, I'd love that too. He's sitting in the chair comfortably, so he is okay for the minute. So most of you are still in a degree of unworthiness and undeserving. And if you were to move back into feeling just how much you were loved, you would no longer be able to hold onto any of your excuses. A lot of you in your beings felt that when you were loved into existence by your source, it did you wrong. You loved it into existence, but you felt like you were rejected and kicked out. So you were reacting like a child throwing a temper tantrum. You're not going to do what is wanted of you, which is just seeing the beauty within you. The way out of your anger, the way out of your shyness is to move back through the anger at having been created and you'd be home. Take your fear or anger and follow it back to the feeling and know that you are all right. When you do, there is no need to feel shy. Being shy implies that you are going to do something wrong, that you might not behave quite properly. But when you are okay within your being, there is nothing you can do wrong. Shyness is a picture or an image for the external world that says, I am afraid of being me. The fear behind shyness is the fear of being yourself, whether alone or around other people. It is a fear of feeling okay to be yourself. If you are wanting to move beyond that and back into yourself, it will come from feeling the all rightness of you and knowing that you are just fine right where you are. So, thank you, Carl. Amazing. Appreciate you for showing up today. Everyone else too. I'm going to just do a real quick sign off today because of all that has happened during this live stream and say I hope you have a great day and appreciate the love that you can send to all those who need it, which includes you and everyone else too. So with that, have a great day. Laura J. Namaste. Namago.